Welcome back to Goddess State, where we are creating divine realities, awakening consciousness, and building global brands through identity work and important conversations. So today we have an astrophysicist with us, Rosa Hope, who is going to be talking to us about the similarities between the conversation in science and the conversation in spirituality, and this art of integration, what it looks like to actually take information, embody that information, and let it be lived wisdom. So, Rosa, thank you for being with us today. I would love for you to tell us why you became an astrophysicist and where this awakening of consciousness even started for you.
Of course. First of all, thank you, Aura, for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I think one of the things that is interesting about my journey as a scientist is that many stories in this arena are like, I was a hardcore materialist and then something major happened in my life, or I got in a car crash and I saw the light and now I'm a different person. That's not what happened to me. So I have actually been deeply interested in metaphysical and esoteric things since I was a little child. I was always interested in ESP and ghosts and the paranormal and things like that. But more than anything, I just had this insatiable curiosity, and it just wasn't limited. So I've always been interested in math and science, but I've also always been interested in the supernatural, in the spiritual. I had so many deep questions in Sunday school as a child that I got kicked out more than once, you know? So like,
Relatable.
I think, exactly. So I think that is just, I've always been this way. And in a sense, my spiritual journey began before I went to school for physics. It's just that I had really pointed questions about how the universe functions, what it's made of, what are we, etc. And thought to myself at that time, like, well, who is going to have a better answer than the physicists? Because they study this for a living, right? But of course, in graduate school, discovered there are very hard limits to what science can teach us. But I think it's not just that my work bridges these two things. It's that, like, I personally bridge them also. As you said, I think science and spirituality ultimately are in pursuit of the same thing. They can't answer exactly the same questions, but all of it is trying to understand the universe better, understand what we are better, and what we should do while we're here, right? Like all of these things actually intersect together. And what I often say is that science does a great job of telling us how stuff works, but it can never tell us why. We need philosophy, we need spirituality to get meaning out of this, to figure out like why we're here is not something science can tell us. So I think we need both.
Yeah, that's beautiful. For people wondering what an astrophysicist is or does, what would you tell them in like a sentence or two?
Sure. So, physicists in general study how the universe functions. How does matter work? How does it interact with itself? And there are many different branches of physics. For example, thermodynamics is how things respond to heat. There's, electromagnetism, which is what it sounds like. So there's all these there's quantum mechanics, which people in the spiritual industry love, So there are all these different branches. And the reason I actually didn't intend to become an astrophysicist, I wanted to be a particle physicist. So I wanted to study subatomic particles, maybe work at CERN, something like that. But I ended up becoming an astrophysicist, first of all, because the people were like more my vibe. So like as I met the people doing it, I was like, y'all seem cool. But astrophysics is the study of stars and the universe. And what that actually means is we have to know all of the branches of physics because all of them come into play when it comes to like how a star is formed, how it shines, how galaxies have the shapes they do, how the universe has the shape that it does. So you end up having to know all of it. And I have never been one to turn down a challenge, I guess. So I ended up in a little bit, maybe bit off more than I could chew. But after those first 2 years of graduate school, I really did enjoy my time there. I love learning more about the universe. I'm very happy with the contribution I made to that field. But yeah, it's using physics to try to describe what happens in the universe, stars, planets, all of the cosmos. Like that all falls under the umbrella of astrophysics.
Thank you for explaining that. Why do you think that spirituality still then needs a space next to the studies of like physics? Why do we need spirituality then?
Well, like I said, physics ultimately is describing the universe through the language of mathematics. And to be honest, that can be really transcendent too. Math is really nothing more than a language. It's a language of relationships. So it's something that you can learn. But again, you're never going to get meaning from that. And I think that's part of the human condition is like somewhere in our hearts, somewhere in our psyches, we start to feel really empty or life begins to feel really pointless if we don't have purpose, if we don't have meaning. And I mean, I keep my beliefs pretty flexible because in general, as I learn new things, oftentimes I have to reassess my beliefs and sort of change my internal framework for what I'm doing or what's going on in the world. But so in a sense, it's like, I don't care if you are making meaning for yourself in your life, because you get to do that if you want to. You can like design your own meaning if you need it and you can't find it, just make something up and go with it for now. Like that works too. Mm-hmm. But I also think the spiritual aspect is the search for meaning. It's the search for purpose. And so I have a lot of respect for that. I think we need that to be holistically healthy, because without that, we just feel lost. I think it feeds us in a way that science can't.
I love that. And I feel like this conversation around integration is understanding that we're always different people every second, every month, every year. And it really makes me ask the question, like, when we're born here, do you believe that there are different ages of souls, aka old souls, ancient souls, new souls? And yeah, do you believe in that?
That is a really interesting question. So I want to be really clear about semantics and stuff. So when we talk about different, well, let me like translate how I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
When you ask me about ages of souls, what I think about is experience. So for example, on planet Earth, we're getting into the woo now. Okay, everybody buckle up.
This is what we're here for.
Yeah. When we end up on planet Earth, there may be souls that have had a lot of experience as a human being. So they know the ropes. It's not that hard for them to adjust to what needs to happen here in order to survive or be like socially adept or something like that. They kind of get it. And then there might be souls that have spent a lot of time doing other things and haven't spent a lot of time on Earth, or maybe never have spent much time on Earth. And so it's harder for them to make the adjustment. I don't think that necessarily means they're younger or older. In a sense, when I think about the age of the universe from a physics perspective, it all came into being at the same time. So I'm not sure that any soul is like a different age per se, like from a time perspective. I do definitely see evidence that people show up here with different levels of experience in how to do this, like how to human. I think there's a range, but in general, my personal interpretation of that is just that they've been doing that soul or that consciousness or that intelligence has just been doing other things. So in a sense, I don't know if that means someone's more advanced than someone else. It just means in this area, they're less developed, if that makes sense. But they might be experts in something else, So that's kind of my take.
No, I love this conversation because it is very woo. And then it also makes me think of the conception of all that is, right? So if you are just a fractal of the whole and I'm just a fractal of the whole, when did we choose to, be individuals? And do you believe in the soul then? Because then you're saying, well, they probably have more experience coming back here as a human, let's say. And then you were like, other people could be doing other things. And I'm like, ooh, what are those other things? Do we get into like the star galactic system?
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
So I again, it's like I've been interested in this stuff since I was a kid. So we're dealing with like decades of me reading books all over the place, right? So, but one of my favorite frameworks comes from Edgar Cayce. He was alive during the early 1900s. He was known as the sleeping prophet. He came from a very fundamentalist Christian background and was really confronted by that as his spiritual wisdom expanded, because he started channeling information about reincarnation and what he called a sojourn, which is what the soul does between human lifetimes. And a lot of what he discussed is that between human lifetimes, individuated souls do all kinds of things. Sometimes they go to other planets and like check that stuff out, or they go hang out with ancestors, or they go to like a sort of school, spiritual school, to learn something. You know, there's all sorts of things that can happen when you're not incarnated, when you're not attached to a body. And it didn't just come from him either. So if you study Dolores Cannon or any of the Life Between Lives hypnotherapists like Brian Weiss and Michael Newton, there's a lot of information out there, even from people that weren't communicating and didn't know each other, that were just out there discovering this using tools like hypnosis, or Robert Monroe, who did all this research on astral projection. So it's the same idea. It's shifting your consciousness out of the body. But all of these people were coming back with the same kind of stories. And again, as a scientist, we can't say like how, at least not now, but the evidence is there that something's happening. There's something about our consciousness that is able to do things or experience things beyond the physical body. And in a sense, I'm like, to me, that's pretty settled. Just because we can't explain how it works doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means it's not hard science yet. Maybe one day we will be able to figure out how our consciousness actually functions. We don't know. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
So.
Do you believe that with every lifetime you can transfer your consciousness in terms of like, if you were an amazing musician in this lifetime, that you would have those gifts in the next one?
Some people can access them. Yeah, some people can access them. I mean, if you look around you, you know that not everybody is functioning in that way. But again, like there are instances of this happening that have been documented. There is an entire like archive at the University of Virginia that is full of case studies of exactly that kind. Small children coming back, having memories of other lifetimes, names of family members, dates when events occurred, and savant skills. So it's not unheard of at all. In fact, it's fairly well documented at this point. So again, it's like the question are things like that happening? The question is like, well, how?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to this conversation about integration, how can you tell that someone needs to do that work? What are the signs?
That's a great question. In a sense, I don't want to rock anyone's world, but in a sense, I'm like, I think all of us probably should engage in integration as a lifelong practice. If you are on the spiritual path, you're going to keep learning. You're going to keep facing and overcoming challenges. You're going to keep growing in capacity, which means there's always going to be a need to integrate the newer things you're learning and the newer capacity. Like as you grow, as you learn new information, it can't change anything in your being or in your life until you integrate it, which means if you're on a journey of growth and learning, integration just needs to be a part of your overall kind of cycle that you're going through.
Yeah.
Now, again, it's like there are times when it's really critical, and there are times when it's like, get to it when you can. So maybe I'll talk about when it's critical.
Yeah.
So I have seen this the most, and this conversation is probably talked about the most in the plant medicine community. We live in a culture that really likes things fast. We want to get it done yesterday. And people even think about their spiritual awakening that way. So sometimes people want to go to the jungle and sit with Mother Aya 5 days in a row and get an enormous download, and then they get on the plane and go home. And that can oftentimes leave people very disoriented, or even wondering, like, is this real? Or like, am I real? Like the ego has kind of gone through a dissolution, and you're trying to figure out, well, who am I really? Who I thought I was, it turns out that's just like who my dad wanted me to be. Like it's this kind of idea. You are trying to put back together an identity, and you're trying to put back together a framework for reality that you can function inside of. If you're in that situation, for sure, integration is like the first stop on the train, right? You need to ground yourself. You need to reassess like who you are, what was programming or conditioning, what's really you. And in a sense, a lot of people working in the plant medicine community have now introduced integration time and integration practice into their packages. And of course, like that's a wonderful thing because It's a great reason to do it. But it's not the only time when it becomes critical. This can also happen to people who go through Kundalini awakening, because that can be really fast also.
Yeah.
So it's more when you've had a seismic shift, whatever it is. Doesn't even matter if it's your first one, but it's like if you're going through a massive seismic shift, your whole concept of reality is falling apart, or your whole concept of who you are is falling apart. That's kind of a call that integration's really needed now.
Yeah, and this brings up the question that I love. I think it's like a meme where it's like, how can we expect people to adapt to a sick society? Where it's like, how can we integrate in a reality that is so, the way it is? And then it begs the question, which is like, what is reality? And why are we adapting to this one? And so these people who have these major downloads, and then they see like the all that is within their infinite intelligence, and they're like, whoa, this can be amazing. Like, we can bring heaven on earth, and they see that, but then they're boom, shot back down into
right back.
Yeah, Earth, and they're like, wow, well, I don't want to adapt to this. What am I supposed to integrate when I have like all the secrets of the universe within myself? How can they begin to not necessarily adapt to this distortion of reality, but bring in a little bit more of heaven on earth in their own way, so that they don't have to be realistic, but they can bring that magic in an integrated way?
Well, you are actually hitting the nail on the head, because in the way I work with people, what you described is the entire point. That's what integration is. It is bringing heaven to earth through your being. So that's literally the end goal of that process, because you're beginning with this kind of like a separate sense. The spiritual is separate from the physical, and through the kind of process you go through in integrating, it's less that we are taking two separate things and putting them together. The truth is that they are already one. The physical already is this. It's completely tied together. It was never separate. Our conceptualization and our culture tells us it's separate. It's not. So in a sense, it's another form of awakening, isn't it? Being able to embrace the physical life. You brought up something interesting though, which is like adapting to a sick society.
Yeah.
And I think you have a good point, which is that you don't want to adapt into being sick yourself. That's where most of us started to begin with. But you do need to be functional. You need to be able to function to do your work here, to ground that vision of heaven, or that vision of higher dimensional living in reality here. You need to be functional. You know what I'm saying? Especially in a society that will like leave you under a bridge if you're non-functional. That's really important. However, it's like you want to know the rules of the game so that you can play it well, or can play it well enough to get by, understanding that that's not your North Star. This is a set of tools for operating in this level of things while you do your big work, capital B, capital W, big work that you've probably been exposed to, and whatever your spiritual awakening was, you're getting a sense of what you really are trying to bring here, what the medicine is that you carry, and the type of experience you would like to have while you're here. So in a sense, it's like we need to have the rules of the game. I think this is something you know particularly well. Like there are real rules that we need to be able to follow in order to give ourselves the foundation to bring it here and to do our work.
Yeah, and this would be a beautiful time to mention, if anyone's wondering, well, what's my work? In astrology, that's the midheaven sign. That's literally the sign where that's the energy that you want to bring in, and then you look to where the ruler is in your chart. That's the energy of what your heaven on earth is, if you believe in astrology. And, to go off of what you were saying, Bashar talks about how this is actually not even real life. It should be called the afterlife, because we go back to, the dream world every night, which is our actual normal state, or we go back to the all that is, the whole. So this is actually the afterlife. What would you say to that? Do you kind of see that perspective?
I love it. So one of the fun things about reframing and also choosing our words in this way is to help awaken a new concept. And that's exactly what this is. So I'm really tickled by that, because doesn't it show us what the priority should really be? Because like that's what it's trying to say is like, if this is the dream, then what happens here is kind of, it's like, well, this is how I think about it. This is like the details. This is like one way to play, if that makes sense. And I can come to that approach after years of suffering and unpacking and doing the work and then suffering some more and then being like, what did I miss? And then like coming back around. So it's like all of that is part of it too. But in a sense, for me, I have landed in almost what I call my sandbox era, where what I do here is up to me in a way that wasn't true before. Because before I hadn't landed on my purpose or my path or even an authentic expression of myself. I was still figuring that out. And all that figuring out stuff ultimately is to get you clear so that you can just like be what you are. It's not even, it doesn't have to be this high pressure thing about like, I need to find my purpose so I can do my job. Like that's really intense. And that's not really, I'm not sure that's really supportive of people in a time like this where things are so uncertain and intense externally, that more intensity to like show up and get the job done internally is really supportive. So I'm kind of on the other side of that now, where I'm like, just by being who you really are, and just by being on the journey of figuring out who you really are. Again, I think that astrology really helps with this too. You know, there are systems that are out there that can help us get more self-knowledge, get deeper self-knowledge. But just by being on that journey and just by embracing that process of being who you are in the world, a lot of your work kind of gets done anyway, because by being yourself, you are serving your spiritual function. And you can be extra about it. I am, you know, but you don't like have to be. It's up to you ultimately. So it's like this, the work happens in phases and stages, right? And I don't think spiritual awakening is something that happens once. I think we keep getting initiated over time again and again as we grow, as we build capacity, as we get to have new experiences. Your level of awareness and mastery and understanding and your ability to be of service will all shift and change as you like go through the course of your life. So to me, when I was in my 20s, I felt a lot of urgency, but I think I felt that because I was a train wreck, you know? So maybe I needed to get on board or else, you know, I wasn't going to make it or something. I was a mess. But once I got my act together and went through that first spiritual awakening, which was messy and was really difficult and had a lot of crying and all of that kind of stuff and a lot of loneliness and these things. It's like you make it through that first big push and then it's like everything opens up in front of you and you have more opportunities to make choices, to be self-directed in the way that you would like to serve. Oftentimes there's not one way. You can be what you are in a lot of different ways. Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to experience is a question you actually get to play with. And that's what I mean by sandbox era, is like you get to be creative. Your life gets to be your creation in a way that isn't always available in the early stages.
Yeah, I think about people right now who maybe they don't have a lot of time to play for whatever reasons. Maybe they are in survival mode. And so to that, I would say take any moment you can to find the play in the moment, right? But I wonder, with this conversation about integration, you know, it really comes down to beliefs and how beliefs are ever changing, and how when you have a new piece of information that kind of contrasts or conflicts with your current beliefs, that's where it's like jarring and you're like, oh, jolted in the opposite direction, because now you feel that belief is so much deeper in your body. And sometimes, you know, you just need someone to give you a belief, which can be a permission slip to believe in what you actually wanted to believe in the whole time. And then because you wanted to believe in that the whole time, it's instantly integrated. And I'll give you a quick example of how I have always felt like my truth could kill people. And I don't know where that comes from. I actually saw in my matrix chart, apparently I led people astray in a past life, and now this life is all about like redemption or whatever. But I have had this belief that like my truth could lead people off the edge, right? And so I had a mentor and I told her this. And she said, you don't have to take responsibility for other people's receptions of you. And I felt that so deeply in my being that it was instantly integrated, and I'm like, oh, that's the truth. You're right. That's the truth. But what's funny is that because it was so instantly integrated, because I already wanted to believe in that, in 5 years, if I'm met with different information that completely conflicts with that, that that kind of split, that like Jekyll and Hyde in your system, that's kind of what I want people to be able to know how to work through. How do you change a belief so drastically that confronts all of your deepest fears? Maybe this is kids who have grown up in religion and now they see something that completely takes them out of their religion and then they're going to be ostracized by their parents. How would you lead someone into integrating a belief that is true for them, even though it's not true for others? What lighthouse would you give them?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, it's important to give yourself some grace. In a sense, you're fortunate that you already had the groundwork within yourself to accept this new belief and integrate it so quickly. I find that happens less often rather than more often. Sometimes, like you said, people have just been waiting for permission. And in that sense, there's a part of me that's like, if there's something you actually believe in your heart that goes against all the external messaging, let's just give everybody permission right now. Listen to your heart. Listen to yourself, if it's your gut or whatever. Going with that is going to lead you to a more fulfilling experience anyway. So there is that. When it's way more difficult or when the changes ahead are pretty drastic, again, I just say give yourself grace. It can be really hard to hold things together that are in opposition or are paradoxical. The other thing is that at different levels of understanding or different levels of consciousness, each might actually be true. So at the current level you're at now, this belief may be correct. But as you expand, a couple years from now or a couple weeks from now, as you are expanding and seeing from a different perspective, the other belief may be true from that level of vision. So understanding that it's not about like if a belief is right or wrong anymore, as much as it is about your state of being. Where are you at? And what is the part of yourself you're trying to cultivate? Or what is the part of you that you're trying to free and liberate, So in a sense, holding those things together can be really difficult, but if you feel the tension, that type of tension you're describing between the old and the new idea, it's actually pointing to the fact that there's space there for you to sit with it and figure out what's actually in alignment with your values about what is important, your values about the type of life experience you'd have to have, and ultimately the belief. Belief is such a strong word, but it's something we hold very deeply and that guides our decision making. But the belief that you end up carrying is going to be the one that aligns with that internal guidance system. Because ultimately, once you have seen the light or like seen this new idea that is more resonant with you, it's only a matter of time before that's what you're aligning with. It's like once that door opens, you can't shut it again. But it may be a gradual process of getting comfortable and also making changes in your life, like you were talking about. If you are making a decision about your beliefs that's guiding you away from the community you've been a part of, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, but it doesn't mean there isn't a better or more fulfilling life for you on the other side of that transition. Yeah. So in a sense, you got to keep the faith that your call to be on this path is the right one.
Do you have beliefs that you're fully convicted in that you don't see changing over the course of your lifetime?
I'm going to say no. I am actually concerned about this sort of calcification of belief. So holding it in this soft way is also my way of embracing my human experience. I have seen what happens when belief, this is my opinion, but like when people hold on to beliefs too hard, it turns into dogma. And we have seen in Western society what happens when dogma is the thing that is adhered to instead of intuition, compassion, a spirit, a heart of service or generosity and things like that. So it's like you're too in the rules or like so in the rules that there's no space for judgment or discernment. So in a sense, it's like I can think about values that I carry that probably won't change. Beliefs is a little different for me because when you say beliefs, I think about my personal cosmology, what I think the world is, or how I think spiritual journey goes, or whatever. Like those are beliefs, and those change for me. My values generally don't. So like I have pretty firm values that have been important for me. Everyone's are going to be different, but like my top value is integrity, because I've seen in my own life that when I act out of integrity, it's a nightmare, which has taught me to stay in line with that and really listen and do what I think is right and say what I think is right, but also like using discernment and stuff like that too. But that is a journey that I've been on for many years. And I don't think there's any way to just like be 100% all the time, but that's my North Star. That's like where I'm aiming, is to live with more integrity every day. But that's a journey too. But I have other values that I hold dear too. Like community is really important to me. Inside of that value carries things like being able to repair relationships, being able to see from different perspectives without judgment. You know, there's a lot of those kind of things that fall under that umbrella. So in a sense, it's my values that are more concrete. I mean, I think that's really what it is. It's not my beliefs that I'm like drawing my line in the sand, but my values I kind of am.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about how you're just taking data. You're taking data from what has worked in your specific vessel for you, and what works for you could not work for someone else. But I love that what you're saying is like, when I don't practice integrity, things fall apart. So I'm going to stick with that. So it's kind of like you're building evidence as to like what works for you. I know that like I need to work out at least 4 days a week, or I have the type of body that just puts on weight so fast. So even if I'm fully exhausted or if I'm sick, I'm like, no. I need to work out because I know what has happened otherwise. I'll fall into a deep depression of like spiral of depression, or something will happen. So I think, yeah, it's less about being crystallized in a certain set of beliefs, but about knowing who you are, and what works for you, right? And
100%.
again, it's also like what works for other people, and seeing that conviction in other people is beautiful too, because sometimes their philosophies or their methods can also work for you, and their very strong conviction can guide you. It's like their lighthouse becomes brighter, and you're like, oh wow, like I believe in you because of how much you believe in yourself. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I definitely feel like I have certain experiences that I believe in, like rewiring the subconscious mind and doing that, utilizing the theta brainwave states right before you fall asleep at night and right as you wake up in the rising. I feel like that's the secret of the universe. Like I'm like, I want to scream it from the rooftops and tell people, like, if you have any issues, whether it's like physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, use the theta brainwave states right as you're about to fall asleep and right as you're about to wake up. And that's like what so many great scientists have done to like tap into the Akashic records or tap into the other side to get that information from where we're actually from, right? Because and I think another proof of like that, how that's the real life, is that these bodies are temporary, right? So we're going to decay. we're gonna, and that just goes to show you that there has to be something eternal. But again, maybe that's just a fleeting belief too.
Well, in a sense, we know a lot about, we don't know how consciousness functions, but human beings have been working in altered states of consciousness for since the Stone Age, right? So it's been going on since before recorded history. So we know there's something there for us. And we know that, people have been able to do dream walking and shift their consciousness into other states. And we've been talking about reincarnation, particularly in Eastern philosophies, like again, since the beginning of recorded history. So there's definitely something there that people have been experiencing all along that points to what you're saying, which is this is just part of the full experience. And what we're aware of every day is just like a slice of all the information that's actually available to us. But what you're pointing to, I think, is really beautiful, which is that, think about what we're doing here, like having a conversation on a podcast, right? This is to share. We're trying to share the roadmaps that we have discovered through our experiences and through the people that we've known or the books that we've read. And that's the whole point, is that like, it's not necessarily that like one path is never going to work for everybody, right? Like everyone, we are in a place where it's time for people to start listening to themselves. But by sharing information in this way, sharing with the wider community, it helps people figure out what puzzle pieces go into their own beautiful design and help them build out their highest destiny without having to go through all the hard knocks. You know what I mean? Because it's like, having gone through all my personal hard knocks, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, right? Which is part of why I want to share and why I want to spread information around, because it's like, what you can get from this, I hope you take it away, right? And what doesn't resonate, forget I ever said it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, bringing that in and finding what feels resonant with you in your journey where you are at is the name of the game, because it is self-knowledge. You are the one who can figure out what's going to work for you in your journey.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you activated so many codes for me just there. I was like, okay, because you just said that you have to take that evidence, right, and figure out what works for you. But you have to be the type of person who sees the mirror reflection of your reality as something that's helping you integrate versus something that is, a problem or means something about you in a negative way, or you're experiencing something in your reality and then you shame yourself for it or you shame the other person and you're missing the medicine. And I think that this is such a beautiful thing to talk about, because you and I actually tried to record this podcast and we brought stuff up within each other in a past episode that wasn't aired, right? But I think that this just speaks to who we are as individuals, of like, I made a comment and then you made a comment and we both kind of triggered each other. But we were able to, be activated in the moment. I had a physical body response of like a trigger, and then again, calmed myself and was like, okay, tried to integrate in the moment. And I was like, okay, I know that we both mean well. And if we know that we both mean well, then there's medicine here for us to take and like integrate in our being. So there's something to be said about, if there's something in your mirror reality that you don't like, ask yourself why that happened, and not to like victim blame you and like take on everything as like, oh, I'm the one who's creating all the terrible chaos, but there's something going on that you can kind of learn from. And so, what do you think about that?
Well, I love this, and I view it in the exact same way that you do, though, which is, it's not like, what am I screwing up? It's more, what is this pointing to, if that makes sense. So so this is something you were talking to me about, which is the way that physical reality is reflecting back at us. And it's not something we need to take on like I screwed something up. It's not that. It's helping us see where our work lies. So in a sense, the helping hand is not always so gentle, I suppose, but that's what it is. It's pointing to where there's something that we've missed. Sometimes there are blind corners that we just haven't seen before. Also, new circumstances arise that dig into parts of ourselves we just haven't really looked at in a couple of years. Like maybe it just hasn't come up. This can happen a lot, particularly where triggers are concerned for me, because in a sense, the life I have now isn't triggering me all the time. So if it happens, it's like, whoopsie, what just happened? It's like a big surprise, I remember being at like a Native American restaurant in Denver a couple of years ago. And I was with my whole family, all the cousins and nieces and everything, like nephews, and we're all together and we're having a good time, about to eat some really good food. And the woman in front of me in line was rude to me. And I was so shocked. I was like, oh, a rude person? Like, what, but it just shows what my life is like, though. The fact that, like, it's just not something I see on a regular basis or contend with on a regular basis. So when that happened, I was floored and was just like, this happens? People still behave this way? What did I do? What did I say? You know what I mean? So it's like I go through the process of what just happened. What the heck? What the heck is this? And ultimately, it's like I didn't even come up with anything good, except for me to recognize in myself that I have had the great good fortune of being around wonderful people that are loving and heart-centered and assume best intentions and all the kinds of things that like we are accustomed to, particularly when you're in like a healthy spiritual community. Like that's where everybody's at. But out in the world is a bigger place. People are in a lot of different places. She was probably hungry. You know?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She wanted her food pretty badly, but you know what I'm saying? So it's like even moments like that can catch us by surprise. But what I love about the discussion we had is that even being caught by surprise, we tried to find the center and tried to build the bridge. And I have enormous respect for you anyway.
Same,
but
likewise.
also I saw us as like a microcosm, as a fractal piece of like this bigger conversation about trying to find each other in all the noise, you know, and trying to make a connection through all of this. And to me, that's so valuable and so precious.
Yeah, and just to like give people a little bit of context, like 20 seconds of context, we ended up talking about billionaires and the state of the world and materialism, and basically if everyone was given $5,000 in the world, would we thrive? And that question that I had really came from this inner turmoil that I have, that I'm wrestling with, which is about the law of duality and the law of polarity. But I have since integrated that question and that wrestling because of our conversation, and I have realized that everyone can actually thrive on this planet, because I had beliefs that I wasn't sure if the law of duality exists. Maybe if there are a bunch of rich people, there has to be a bunch of poor people, and just this like contrast has to exist. But I have since realized that just because hot and cold exists doesn't mean that everyone has to be cold. Doesn't mean that everyone else has to be hot. They are degrees. They are not necessary states of being. And so that was like the lesson that I integrated into myself. But I needed to maybe have that reflection back towards me, to show me like, no, actually, we can all thrive. And so that's kind of, it's funny that we, on a microcosm, we're talking about the politics of the world and the states of the world, and had such intense things arise within us. But that's why I love that our podcast episode is called The Art of Integration, because we had to integrate before we even did this episode together. So it's so embodied. It's so embodied. And yeah, again, like, because we have all, you know, you and I have gone through multiple spiritual initiations to even hold this level of discomfort and be able to alchemize it. For people who might be just awakening on their spiritual journey and being confronted with such terrible experiences where they don't have their consistent baseline as like comfortable and at ease and respectful, what kind of advice would you give to them where they're just like being, you know, a rude person in the car service when they woke up, and then rude boss, and then rude at home? Like, what would you tell that person where it's like, how can you integrate a state of peace when all around you is nothing but chaos? What advice would you give them?
Listen, like really listen, just really listen. Because underneath all of the lashing out that you may see around you is fear and sorrow and isolation. In fact, most of the bitterness and ire that you may find directed at you, most of that's probably not even about you. I mean, if you're a jerk, therein lies your work, right? Like if it's you and you know it's you, like, okay, look at yourself. But if that's not where you're at, if you're working on that state of peace, and if you are working on shining out into the world and being a source of love and compassion in the world, then you know that what you're getting back, these projections from others, aren't actually about you. And that doesn't mean you can turn it around and be like, well, they just have issues. Like, it's not that simple. And that's why my advice is to listen. Sometimes through the act of really sitting and listening, not only does it help increase your own understanding and your empathy, not just for them, but for yourself too, how you're responding to the situation. But it also is spacious. So it creates space to try to integrate the moment and integrate whatever the lesson is. Because I bet you, like, it's never just one thing. Every person's different and every relationship is different. So the conflicts that come up and the uncomfortable conversations that happen in different types of relationships in different spaces may carry different medicine for you. But understanding that there's medicine there. But I have a second piece of advice too, which is if you don't have any bandwidth, don't worry about it. Go like take a bath and like light some incense and try to because like if you don't have the bandwidth to regulate yourself, you're not going to be able to listen, right? So in a sense, it's like put on your own oxygen mask first. But if you are feeling resourced, try listening.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I work with a lot of cycle breakers, and as I call them, ancient souls. But I like your new perspective of, oh, we don't actually know where they've been or how old they are or whatever. I like that. But I was thinking about how most of us have grown up in a state of like extreme isolation because we were around either toxic family members or toxic dynamics where we would have to plug in the earphones and just be like, nope, I'm doing my own thing. But there's something to be said about that, where it's like you always have that connection to source. You always have that connection to your imagination. You always have that connection to the dream world. So the louder you can make that inner world, which is, would you consider there's like a baseline state frequency of that inner world? And if so, what is the frequency that they're trying to get back to, right?
Are you talking about like it as an individual going through life?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking like, because I was about to give advice by saying like, hey, go into isolation, plug in your earphones, and tap into that pure state of like bliss and joy and peace. But if they try to do that, and then all that they hear inside is inner turmoil and chaos and depression and sadness, and they're like, Aura told me to tap in, and I'm full of like terrible emotions, so I don't want to tap in. Like, how can they actually access that state?
Yeah, so I want to preface this first by saying everybody's different. And I think this is quite clear, like from an astrology standpoint or human design or whatever kind of profile is helping you. People have different needs. And so when I think about this, I think about, for example, my husband actually needs that very internal, like he literally puts on headphones like you're talking about. He needs that internal time to recalibrate and create fuel for his creativity, the things that make him happy. So he needs that internal me time. I don't. So for me, when I'm full of inner turmoil, the thing that helps me the most is community. So I reach out to friends. I reach out to my mom, or I try to convince him to have like a conversation with me about some rant. I like history and all sorts of stuff. That's just who I am. But in having conversations and spending quality time together, that's where I find that peace. Because when I go around the world, I see all these people around me as like facets of a diamond, but like the light shining through the diamond is source, is God, is spirit. So everyone around me in my life is showing me that light refracted in a different, beautiful, and unique way. But it means I'm actually making contact, like what you're saying, by being in community with people. That's a weird part of who I am, because I spent my whole young life very isolated, like not able to relate to people particularly well. But I was like a tree hugging nerd, like 6-year-old reading about ESP. Like, of course, these kids want to play soccer and stuff. They don't like understand what's going on with me. But as I got older and better at communicating, I was able to actually engage with others in a way that has brought me immense peace and fulfillment. So in an interesting way, for me, it's going out of my little shell, right? That has provided that for me. Whereas for my husband, it is going in, but having to pass through the turmoil, which isn't always easy for him, but it helps him to listen to, music, for example. So if he picks very specific kinds of music to listen to, that helps take away the noise. Or for example, he has a song that he knows will trigger weeping for him. So if he has an emotion that needs to process, he turns on that one, he gets it by himself, listens to that specific song, which is that trigger for him to release the emotion, does what he needs to do, and then he's clear, So again, it's like understanding yourself and finding your way. I know that's not too helpful, because it's like, do what works for you.
No, it's very helpful, because it activated the tangent or the thought path that I actually really wanted to talk to you about, which was that a lot of people feel that they need to be whole to do the thing, or they need to have this perfect face on to go visit friends, or they need to be fully embodied and fully integrated before they launch their business or show up online. And so I think that this is a beautiful conversation to help people understand that part of integration is showing up where you are at currently, even if you know you have that mindset work to do, even if you know you have that like rage issue that you're working on. It doesn't mean you have to hide yourself away in a cave before everything is fixed, because you will realize that you cannot fix everything, and you are not a person that needs to be fixed. You are just a walking expression of a human being, and you have things to work on. But show up as you are, and if you start leading people one way, and then you realize 3 years down the line that's not the way that you want to lead them anymore, part of that integrative process is sharing with people all the lessons and the wisdom that you've gained along the way, and why you're pivoting, and why this is actually the new way now. Because people could, listen to your podcast 3 years ago and be like, oh, I resonated with her truth back then. I don't resonate with what she's saying now, but I actually still want to be in her space now because of the teachings that she led back then. And so people will be able to resonate with you also in different timelines of your journey. So yeah, that was a great point. What do you think about that, about showing up imperfectly? And do you think that's a conversation that needs to be had right now?
I think what you're describing is the future of us being in relation with one another, period. I think one of the biggest changes that we are experiencing right now collectively is that things that could be hidden in the past are not hidden any longer. And I think my experience of this is going to be different than others. If you still have shame about your past, it's going to be scary for everything to be uncovered, right? But if you don't carry shame for your past, if you can look behind you and say, I needed that to learn. I had to go through that. Please don't you do it. But like I had to, it's a different way, because then it's like if you're kidding other people about where you're actually at and who you really are, then when everything comes to light, then it's like, oh no, it's not a match. And I challenge everyone, just try, don't freak out. But like, I challenge everyone to see if you can find the courage in yourself to really try to just be who you are, where you are at. It might not be perfect, but guess what? Nobody is, right? Like, we are all here together. We wouldn't be on planet Earth if we were perfect. In fact, most of us there's no real hierarchy, in my opinion, because it's like, I may be really developed in one area, but it means I haven't had time to cultivate these other parts, but you might have cultivated those. So we are able to support each other communally and collectively. We have what we need. Absolutely. But it also teaches us that we need each other. We need each other to grow and be more expansive and be supported and be more effective and capable as humans, because all of us have shortcomings and all of us have parts that are underdeveloped and parts that are overdeveloped, but we balance each other out together. So, but yeah, I would challenge everyone, try to relinquish shame and guilt about the past. Try to let those karmic loops go. Try to accept yourself where you are right now. It doesn't mean you don't want to grow anymore. Of course you do. You're on the path. You're going to grow anyway, whether you want to or not, but it just means being with yourself where you are right now is totally okay. And if the people around you get upset when you're showing up as your own self, then you probably should be with different people who can be with you when you've been crying so your mascara's messed up or whatever. It's like, that shouldn't matter anymore. And my take on this is that that's where the future is leading, is where we can just be with each other, unhidden from one another, accepting and loving of one another, and holding compassion for each other where we are on the journey, like no judgment about it.
Yeah, and I think that it also, there's nuance too, because it's like, how many times can one person try to share a pattern that you have that may be toxic, for instance, and then now it becomes your choice, let's say, to like keep upholding that pattern, versus like working with someone who might have an unconscious pattern that they keep repeating, but they're committed to figuring out why it's there. So I think, again, it comes down to the values of the person. Like, they could have this toxic pattern that they're expressing for 2 years, but they don't know where it's coming from, but they're committed to figuring it out. And they're like, thank you for being on this journey with me. I don't know why I'm like this. I don't know if it's like a childhood wound. I don't know if it's because of my abandonment issues or whatever. But they say, I'm committed. I'm committed. And so it really has to do with like, if this is in partnership or in friendship or in community, your community has to accept you as you are, where you're at, even if you have these patterns that you are hopefully committed to overcoming.
Yeah. Well, and there's two sides of this too, which is the other side of that is like, when I say you, I really mean like me or whoever.
Yeah, no,
but it's
exactly.
Like if you've been working on the same thing for a couple of years and it's not really shifting and the person who's been supporting you can't do this with you anymore, it needs to be okay for them to say that and to be able to say like, I have given what I can to helping you through this and I no longer can. I'm being called to different work and I'm being called to support other people. Needs to be something we can handle and be like, I see you, I get it, I know I'm still in this loop. But it shouldn't, of course, it shouldn't change your commitment to working on yourself and doing the stuff we're doing in the spiritual journey. But I think that's one of these sort of last vestiges that I've seen, at least in my own community and with my own friends, that they're still coming up against is people are starting to set better boundaries and say, I've given what I can to this project, or I've given what I can as an emotional support for this particular issue. Yeah. They're starting to speak up and be true to themselves and say, I need to put this energy towards something else now. And then the other person handles it really badly. And so I feel like there's a lesson in there for all of us collectively too. It's not just setting the boundary is a really good skill that we also need. And that I think is very important, but being able to accept and respect a boundary. I'm checking in with myself and I'm like, I like to think I'm good at that. Probably not as good as I would like to think I am, I guess. But, it's like, these are places where we can still do some soul searching and be like, well, ask the questions. What's that about? How can I support myself if I'm disappointed or if someone says no when I wish they would say yes? Like those are just it's part of being a good collaborator, like from a spiritual perspective, from like a nuts and bolts 3D perspective, like this is how we do it together. It takes both sides, being able to set a boundary and respect a boundary. And so again, it's like being able to listen to each other, empathize and have compassion for each other, even when, for example, like setting a boundary could mean like if it's like a relationship or a boyfriend or something, it could mean y'all are going separate ways or something. But there's more than one way to do this. There's more than one way to handle that. And so the question is like, well, what is the highest way that you can deal with the situation? And that's not really an abstract thing. It's like checking with your bandwidth. How much energy do you have? Are you resourced? Because if you're hungry, it's not going to go well. You should be like, wait till I eat this cheeseburger and then tell me the bad news or something, But it's like, there's the sort of abstract, how would the highest version of myself handle this? And then there's like, what can I actually manage right now? And if it's not a perfect match, you're okay. Just do your best, No,
I completely agree. And I think that for the person on the end of like the one needing to set the boundaries, it's not so much that you're giving up on other people, but it's that you're being called to either higher lessons or higher level of leadership and service, that the person that you're with can't actually hear you anymore. So you're actually being of disservice to them because you're not even a medicine for them anymore, since what you're delivering to them can't help them. So they need to find a teacher maybe at their level that's 2 steps ahead of them versus like 15 steps ahead of them. And then
it's for both of you.
Yeah, it's for both of you.
Yeah.
And this just even goes to show for women or people in business, if you're called to serve a different client or a different level of client, it's because you're not actually activating the skills or even growing in the lessons that you're teaching anymore. So if it feels dull for you, it's not even going to be activating for people. So it kind of like, you're graduating to your own skill set too.
Yeah. And I think that's beautiful. It's okay to say it's not working anymore. We grieve, like we feel sad, because we like to be together and we like to do stuff together and be with people we care about. But I mean, I'm sure every woman alive has had some kind of romantic entanglement with someone they know should actually stay far, far away from them, but you still love them.
Yeah.
You still love them all the way and hope you never meet again. Like I think that's a fairly common experience. But that's what I mean. You can step away from something with perfect love and perfect goodwill, knowing it's the right thing to do, and it still might be hard, but that doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. So again, you are respecting yourself by embracing the shift, and you're respecting the people you're working with by telling them the truth, So like all of that stuff is so important, but it's like as we are ascending or as we're shifting into a new way of doing things in a new era, unfortunately, we don't just get all the beauty and transcendence. We get to work on our like mediation skills too,
Yeah.
Our like relational skills. That's the nuts and bolts of 5D is like getting along.
I agree. I think it was Tony Robbins who said that the quality of your life is the quality of your emotional regulation and the quality of your relationships. And I was like, it's so true. Like if you're not emotionally regulated, you're not going to have quality relationships. And so just the whole state of your life is going to crumble. What would you say, because I'm imagining myself 5 years ago finding this podcast and wishing that they spoke about these answers, which would be, if someone is in conscious incompetence, they know all the things, they are overthinking everything, but they don't know how to ground all of that information into, one, their bodies, and two, into actionable like steps. I was in this state of conscious incompetence for 2.5 years. It was like a state of hell, because I was like, I know all the things, I know. But I could not do anything with all of this knowledge, and it felt like every day was just on a loop. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice for that person that feels like they know all the things, but their reality isn't changing because they're not taking action, because they're in this state of just overthinking all of the things that they know. Conscious incompetence.
Yeah. Well, you're describing a heavily mental process. And as like an academic, I completely relate to that 100%. My knee-jerk reaction has always been to intellectualize everything. So I was in this circumstance too, around my Saturn return, major downloads, flaming pile of garbage, love life, like, so it's that's kind of how it looked at that time. And honestly, these two things are related. Here's what helped me. I had to learn how to listen to my body in a new way. I had to learn how to access the body's wisdom, which meant a type of respect for my body that I hadn't had before. It's almost like I thought my body was the car that carried my brain around or something. And I had to completely change how I thought about that, because my intuitive knowing about, and this is the thing that guides the way I make decisions, actually is coming from my gut. And I was so intellectual and had no idea. So I'm like, why does my stomach feel sick all the time? Like, why am I always nauseous or whatever? And it's because I wasn't listening. I didn't know it was a message. So knowing for me that my body was communicating with me all the time, and then listening and beginning to understand what it meant, this one's pretty basic. If I feel sick, that's a no. If I feel great, that's a yes. If I feel a little anxious, that's actually an invitation to expand my capacity. So, but it's like I had to trial and error my way through it. Maybe everyone else doesn't need to, but like that's what I had to do. The other thing is, this is related to the body, is that like finding the physical things in life that brought me joy, that triggered a joyful experience or enjoyment in myself, made a big difference. Because what I realized is that these major downloads I had were causing me to reject my human experience as a lesser thing. And by finding the things in life, in physical life, that made me joyful, helped me embrace my human experience as an equal thing rather than a lesser thing to my spiritual experience. So bringing that together and understanding that the physical is it's almost like the system inside of which we get to do this big work, right? It's part and parcel to how we decided to do it here together. But without having access to joy, all of this felt like a drag, which is why I had to find those things. So for me, that was movement. So things like dance class and stuff like that. For some people, it's yoga. For some people, it's like ice cream or whatever. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it's like, the difference between feeling like a temporary satisfaction and feeling joyful, and narrowing in on that joyful expression, that enjoyment of myself brought in the embrace that let it all ground. It's like I had to put roots down in the physical system in order to become, it's hard to explain. You've seen the toroidal field and stuff like that. You're bringing the transcendent here, but to do that, you need to be rooted and grounded here. So those are the types of things that help the most, is me getting into good communication with the body and finding stuff that I enjoy and like doing it as often as I could.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So much. Yes. Because sometimes you'll have like all these ideas, whether it be for your business or for something that you want to create, and you can't seem to strategize it or put what's in your mind on paper. But then you take a shower and you do the dishes and you do like the monotonous things, and then everything comes through and you're like, oh my God, I needed to like let it go. I needed to not like stay focused on it. I needed to just be in my body and do the regular things of life. Oh, thank you for that. That was so good.
Yeah, just go have fun.
Yeah, go have fun. Go outside. Go touch grass. Do you have any last ideas that you feel we haven't covered with the topic of integration that you want people to know about?
Yeah, well, there's sort of one kind of phrase that I love to come back to, which is just something to sit with or something to chew on, which is that we are not trying to transcend the physical. We are trying to make the physical transcendent.
Bringing that heaven to earth. And do you have an image of what that looks like for you and how you're doing that?
Man, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to be loving. I'm trying to be a lighthouse of love. I'm trying to share openly, with honesty, with humility, and be really transparent about the journey I'm going through and the state that I'm holding. Because in a sense, it's what we said before. I am trying to live as though nothing is hidden. And for me, that level of transparency, you've probably experienced or seen this before, the sort of crystalline world, the crystalline version of reality or something. And that's all about transparency and honesty and all of those things. So it's like, I'm trying to just live it. And then hopefully the people around me are influenced by that, or inspired by that, or encouraged by that, so they can show up too.
Wow, that's beautiful. I feel like that's a whole other podcast episode, because I was like, oh my God, we can go down so many different routes. I was like, oh my gosh, but do you believe in honesty in every case? And I was like, okay, we're going to leave that first. Because it brings up so much. But wow, I love that. Yeah, I'm envisioning a crystalline reality. It looks and sounds and feels beautiful. So I have a couple of questions to close this out.
Sure.
What is the best advice that you've ever received?
Oh my gosh, wow, you should have prepped me for this one.
It's okay. I love knowing, like, right off the bat what comes to mind. I think that's the beauty in it.
Chill.
Chill.
Yeah. I am very
Chill
intense, as you know now. And so again, this is probably not advice for everybody, but for me, it's what I needed. I have been running on all cylinders for a really long time. And what's funny is, like, when I graduated, and when I got my PhD and I switched to a new role at that time, my boss at the time was laughing at me about how intense I was and how I always was like, wanted more to work on and more to work on, more to work on. And he was like, chill. Like, he's this Northern California tech dude guy, right? And he's like, chill, like, go take a nap or something. Go bake bread. You like baking, right? But that was so important for me, because that was the beginning of a journey of me relearning how to rest. And that was really important for me at that time. Yeah, chill. It's not a race. And I tell my clients this all the time, because I think we do have a lot of sense of urgency, but I have a lot of faith in the natural process of our unfolding now that I don't think I had earlier. I see things happening when we're ready, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what is the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh my gosh. I've received an abundance of bad advice over the course of my life, so like picking the worst is pretty difficult. Yeah. Well, and this is very subjective too, so I'm going to say that right now. This was the worst advice for me. It's probably not the worst advice for everybody. But the worst advice for me was take the job that'll make the most money. Because I'm a very purpose-driven individual deeply. And like, if you dig into my chart, you'll find it in there like 5 times that like the mission really matters to me. So for me, that was a recipe for disaster, like my hair falling out, like health problems and the whole shebang, like autoimmune, all this kind of stuff cropped up. And ultimately it's because if I'm not working towards a mission that I believe in and towards a purpose I believe in, I become an animal in a cage.
I hear that deeply. Yeah. And finally, what is one way that someone can embody divinity right now?
Breathe.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's good. So simple. Literally.
It doesn't have to be complicated, you know?
Oh, thank you so much, Rosa. This was incredible. How can people work with you?
Sure. I'm very active on Threads and Instagram. So if you want to like actually chat and get in my DMs, my handle is It's Rosa Hope. If you want to dig into my offerings, my website is rosa-hope.com. You can learn all about me and the ways that I work with people. And I'd be very happy to hear from anyone. So feel free to just drop me a line if you're curious.
Perfect. And all of Rosa's information will be in the show notes below. So thank you so much, Rosa. This was incredible. And goddesses, we will see you next week on Goddess State, the next episode.
Thank you, Aura.